No matter how great you think these managers are, they still need great players. Pep's first season at Manchester City, he finished outside the top 4.
Manchester City began the 2025/26 season surrounded by noise.
And a manager as great as him is really struggling and finding it tough, and he's never gone through this before, so he's got no experience.
From pundits calling the dynasty dead, to rival fans celebrating every misstep, the questions grew louder than the football. The back-to-back champions who once looked untouchable now looked uncertain. A shaky August, a frustrated fan base, a manager accused of running out of ideas.
It's the first time I've seen a Man City team led by Pep Guardiola almost like tapping out, almost looking for the final whistle.
They said Guardiola's philosophy had gone stale. They said City had been figured out. Too much control, not enough chaos. Too many passes, not enough goals. The headlines wrote themselves, and one fan's post captured the mood perfectly. Unfortunately, it's time to admit Pep shouldn't have renewed and moved on. It deeply pains me to say it, but I never thought I'd see a Guardiola team look so devoid of everything that once made him the best coach in the world. It was brutal, honest, and widely shared. But while the noise got louder, Pep went quieter. No panic, no outburst, just training, repetition, and belief. Inside the dressing room, the message never changed. Trust the football. And then came the response, not with words, but with performances.
What's it? Foden. Oh, that's clever. Haaland!
A 3-0 demolition of Manchester United, calm in Europe against Napoli, Monaco, and then Dortmund. A run of wins that rebuilt rhythm, belief, and fear. And when Liverpool arrived at the Etihad in early November, confident after defeating Real Madrid, City answered every doubt in 90 perfect minutes and moved second on the table. It wasn't just a victory, it was a masterclass. Control, conviction, and silence. The kind that only greatness can command. Because football doesn't remember who shouts the loudest. It remembers who plays the best when everyone's watching. And in the autumn of 2025, Pep Guardiola reminded the world exactly who he is. The end of the 2024/25 season felt different at Manchester City. For the first time in years, the dominance looked human. A campaign that started with the usual talk of a treble ended with fatigue, inconsistency, and an uncharacteristic stumble. City finished third in the Premier League, their lowest since 2019, and failed to reach the Champions League final for the first time in 3 seasons. Pep Guardiola called it a year of recalibration. Pundits called it the beginning of the end. By the summer of 2025, the questions became sharper. Could City's tactical precision survive football's chaos cycle? Could Pep still evolve after 8 years in England? August answered brutally. August 10th, 2025, Tottenham 2, Manchester City 0. City dominated possession, 69%, yet registered just 2 shots on target. Spurs pressed high, and City's structure broke down under counter pressure. For the first time in 18 months, City went back-to-back Premier League games without scoring. 1 week later at the Amex, Brighton 2, City 1. 2 goals conceded from wide transitions. The statistics were startling. In just 180 minutes of football, City faced 14 shots on target, more than they had allowed in any 2-game stretch of the previous season. Pundits didn't hold back. Gary Neville, this isn't control, it's confusion. Carragher, City are predictable. They've lost that fear factor. Even rival managers hinted that Guardiola's structure had been decoded. For a team built on perfection, the optics were heavy. City's XG difference dropped to plus 0.3, their lowest in 5 years. Erling Haaland had 1 goal in his first 4 appearances, his worst start to a campaign since arriving in England. Rodri, the anchor of Pep's system, missed the early games through injury and is still struggling with the recurring cases. The new signings, Ryan Cherki, Rayan Ait-Nouri, still finding their rhythm, looked out of sync with City's positional play. Internally, there was no panic, but there was reflection. Training sessions stretched longer. Pep stripped back the tactical complexity and focused on rhythm and speed, sharper one-touch phases, positional triangles, faster rest-defense recovery. The press didn't see that work. What they saw was a team 2 points from mid-table and a manager who no longer looked invincible. At his pre-derby press conference, Guardiola was calm, maybe too calm for those who expected confrontation. When asked whether he'd been figured out, he smiled and said, "Football doesn't change because of opinions. It changes because of work." The numbers backed him quietly. Even in those defeats, City averaged 18 shots per game, controlled over 65% possession, and recorded an XG higher than every opponent they faced. The problem wasn't philosophy, it was sharpness. Still, the headlines wrote their own story. Pep's era is ending. Talk shows debated whether this would be his final season. Some pundits openly predicted a Liverpool-Arsenal title race, with City finally running out of fuel. But inside the Etihad dressing room, there was no talk of endings, just one message written on the tactical board after the Brighton defeat: trust the process, the response will come. That response began quietly in mid-September. The city that had gone silent was about to start roaring again. The reset began with a derby that couldn't be talked away. On the 14th of September 2025, Manchester City beat Manchester United 3-0 at the Etihad Stadium. Phil Foden opened the scoring, Erling Haaland added a brace, and the noise around Pep Guardiola shifted from doubt to data. Equally important, the new addition between the sticks, Gianluigi Donnarumma, delivered a debut worth remembering. A clean sheet and a showstopper save from Brian Mbeumo when the score was only 2-0. Donnarumma's presence added a new spine to the side, his towering frame, lightning reactions, and the sense of reassurance that even when City pressed higher and chanced more, the last line held firm. Guardiola's faith in him turned a narrative of instability into one of strength. The performance was the blueprint City had been missing. City controlled territory and tempo, limited United's threats, and hit clean, repeatable patterns. Wide isolation for Jeremy Doku to create the first goal, early second half acceleration to kill the game, and a compact rest defense that protected transitions. Match reports across outlets agreed on the hierarchy of influence. Foden's opener, Doku's supply line, Haaland's finishing, and the scoreline's clarity. The numbers told the same story as the eyes. Post-break City were sharper in the final third and calmer when pressed. United were restricted and then punished. The result ended talk of a spiral and re-established a simple truth. When City's press and box occupation clicked, chances became inevitable and clean sheets feel routine. 4 days later, the control traveled to Europe. Against Napoli at the Etihad, City won 2-0 in the Champions League. Haaland became the fastest player to 50 UCL goals, 49 games, heading in Foden's lobbed pass before Doku sealed it. A night defined by patience in possession and a locked rest defense against 10 men after Giovanni Di Lorenzo's 21st minute red card. Across those 5 days, the trend line flipped. Derby control, European calm, and a manager who hadn't shouted back at anyone. He'd just adjusted spacing, simplified the press, trusted Foden centrally, and let Haaland's habits take over in the box. When asked about the critics in late October, Pep's tone matched the football. Rushing to judgment was the problem. The work was the answer. The comeback didn't end in September, but it started there. And from that night, City stopped defending themselves in studios and started defining themselves on the pitch. When September turned into October, Manchester City were no longer just responding. They were reasserting. The signs weren't subtle, they were decisive. After 2 early losses in the Premier League, this club had recalibrated, rebuilt the machine, and turned rhythm into results. On 27th September, City demolished Burnley 5-1, putting one of their most one-sided performances of the season on display. The shot count soared, the transitions rattled the opponent, and Haaland once again looked like the predator he was signed to be. That game marked more than goals. It marked a switch from tentative dominance to confident execution. A week later, away in the Champions League at AS Monaco, City drew 2-2. On paper, not a win, but in context a step forward, reacting after going behind, maintaining structure under pressure, and showing character. That capacity to absorb and respond underlined the evolution of the squad. Then on the 18th of October, against Everton at home, City won 2-0 thanks to a second half Haaland brace. With that victory, they moved a step closer to being back in the Premier League title race. Haaland's strike marked his 11th consecutive game with a goal for club and country, extending a run no one in Europe's top flight was matching. This wasn't luck. The patterns were emerging. City's average shots per game climbed. Their opponent's shot volume dropped. In one 5-match stretch, they averaged over 20 shots per game, conceded under 6 total, and maintained over 65% possession. These aren't cosmetic upgrades. They're foundation stones. In the Champions League on the 5th of November, City smashed Borussia Dortmund 4-1. The headline went to Phil Foden, who scored twice, but make no mistake, this was a collective statement. Haaland extended his UCL streak yet again. Doku and Savinho stretched the wide channels. The rest defense locked down transitions. City registered 9 shots on target to Dortmund's 1. The Etihad felt alive again. Off the pitch, the mood shifted. Pep's pre-match press conferences were shorter, sharper, less about justification and more about lowercase belief. "We are not chasing yesterday," he said. The players, once flat, looked leaner, energetic. The cumulative load of trophies, expectations, and late-night games seemed no longer to suppress the squad. It fueled them. Momentum now mattered more than moment. City were building it. They showed that when the press triggers dropped, when intervals were precise, when transition lanes were exploited, the accumulated advantages piled up. By late October, their league position didn't yet scream title favorite, but the performances did. Now the question wasn't if City had turned the corner, it was who could stop them. Coming into this match, Liverpool had momentum. They'd beaten Real Madrid in the Champions League just days earlier, but they were not invincible. City, still managing injury absences and rotation, were written off by some pundits. What happened next was 90 minutes of tactical clarity that reminded everyone why Guardiola remains one of football's finest tacticians. It was one of those nights at the Etihad that quietly remind everyone what makes Manchester City different. No drama, no noise, just a team that knows exactly what it's doing. The game started in the rain, and from the first few minutes you could tell Pep Guardiola had come with a plan. City weren't rushing, they were patient, recycling the ball through their shape, waiting for Liverpool to overcommit. Within 10 minutes, Jeremy Doku had already forced a penalty after a sharp run inside the box.
After review, the goalkeeper creates a foul challenge.
Erling Haaland stepped up and missed, but there was no panic, no shouting, no drop in intensity. City just kept the rhythm. Their breakthrough came on 29 minutes. Matheus Nunes, who'd been excellent drifting between the lines, whipped in a cross from the right, and Haaland made no mistake this time. 1-0, a classic center forward's header, but built on Guardiola's structure, movement, spacing, patience. Right before halftime came the second, a short corner routine, Bernardo Silva keeping the ball alive, and Nico Gonzalez taking a shot that deflected past the keeper. 2-0, and City walked off the pitch looking completely in control. They'd had about 60% of the ball by then, and their passing accuracy was close to 91%. It wasn't flashy, it was clinical. The tactical setup was pure Guardiola. Bernardo Silva dropped into the pivot to help build from the back, while Phil Foden pushed higher as an advanced 8, linking up with Haaland and Doku. Foden was everywhere, covering ground, carrying the ball forward, threading passes. On the left, Doku was a nightmare for Connor Bradley, beating him repeatedly and forcing Liverpool to double up just to contain him. Even so, he kept finding gaps. Liverpool had one big moment, a Virgil van Dijk header ruled out for offside against Andy Robertson. But that was as close as they got. City never lost control. The third goal arrived on 63 minutes, and it summed up the difference between the teams. City won the ball in midfield, broke forward quickly, and Doku cut inside from the left to curl a brilliant finish into the far corner. 3-0. Game over. It was his 7th goal contribution of the season, and maybe his best yet. Statistically, the story was as one-sided as it looked. Pass accuracy, 91%. XG, City 2.14. Liverpool 0.72. Possession, almost even, but all the control belonged to City. Foden, 5 chances created, 9 progressive passes. Doku, 6 successful dribbles, the most on the pitch. It wasn't about reinventing football. It was about getting back to what Guardiola teams always do best, controlling every moment. Liverpool had beaten Real Madrid in Europe just 5 days earlier, but here they were pulled apart by a side that never rushed, never panicked, and never let go of the ball. City ended the night second in the Premier League with 22 points from 11 games, reducing the gap on Arsenal. Pep's 1000th match as a manager turned into a masterclass, and once again he let the football do the talking. It wasn't reinvention, it was refinement. They said the genius was gone, but on this night, Pep Guardiola reminded the world why he's still the game's greatest teacher.
We did it.